When people look at modern Middle Eastern history, they tend to begin at the end of the First World War. But like most simplistic explanations, this ignores centuries of history. The huge Muslim empires which once stretched from the gates of Vienna to the borders of China were not monolithic entities. In the 17th century, three colossal empires dominated the Islamic world: the Ottoman Empire in the West, the Safavid Empire in Persia, and the Mughal Empire in India. These were not nation-states, but dynastic realms. But these empires were completely divided by numerous religious sects and ethnicities. Various groups were based on different ethnic backgrounds: Kurds in their mountain strongholds, Bedouin tribes following ancient migration routes across the Arabian Peninsula. The Islamic world was divided between Sunni Muslims, who followed the Ottoman Caliph, and Shia Muslims, who looked to the Safavid Shahs of Persia. Sufi mystics sought direct connection with God through poetry, music, and dance. Ancient Christian communities, Armenians, Greeks, Copts, had lived in the region for centuries. Jewish communities thrived in cities like Baghdad, where they made up nearly half the population. The millet system allowed these communities to govern themselves while remaining part of the larger imperial framework. Beyond the cities, tribal identity was paramount. The Banu Utbah, for example, were expelled from Iraq, moved to Kuwait, then to Qatar, eventually conquering Bahrain in the late 18th century. The House of Saud was part of the larger Banu Hanifa tribe, launching unification campaigns following the strict Wahhabi sect. By the 18th century, the great gunpowder empires were showing signs of fatal weakness. Their military technology fell behind Europe's. Their administrative systems became corrupt. Local leaders grew more powerful, challenging the authority of distant emperors. The final blow to the Safavids came in 1722 when Afghan forces laid siege to Isfahan. When the city fell, the dynasty was shattered, plunging Persia into civil war. From this chaos emerged Nader Shah, a military genius who briefly restored Persian power through brutal conquest. His invasion of India in 1739 delivered a mortal blow to the Mughal Empire. The emperor was left humiliated, a powerless figurehead as the empire fragmented. New regional powers like the Marathas filled the vacuum, while European companies consolidated their coastal enclaves. In the arid heart of Arabia, a movement began that would challenge Ottoman authority itself. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab preached radical purification of Islam. In 1744, he forged a pact with Muhammad ibn Saud, combining religious zeal with political ambition. Their forces swept across Arabia, conquering tribe by tribe, oasis by oasis. In 1802, they sacked the Shia holy city of Karbala, shocking the Muslim world. Soon after, they captured Mecca and Medina, purging what they saw as idolatrous practices. This was not mere tribal rebellion. It was a frontal assault on the Sultan's authority as caliph. The Ottomans, tied up in European wars, were slow to respond effectively. For a time, it seemed a desert-born puritanical power would redraw the map of Arabia entirely. In 1798, the abstract threat of European power became shocking reality. Napoleon's modern army crushed the medieval Mamluk forces at the Battle of the Pyramids. The French brought not just soldiers, but scientists, engineers, and new ideas. Muhammad Ali, an Albanian officer, learned from Napoleon's example. He seized power, massacred the Mamluk elite, and launched radical modernization. European-trained armies, modern factories, secular schools, Egypt became a laboratory for reform. Inspired and threatened by Muhammad Ali's success, the Ottomans launched their own reforms. Mahmud II brutally crushed the corrupt Janissary Corps and created a modern army. The Tanzimat brought railways, telegraphs, secular education, and centralized administration. Modernization was expensive. To fund their reforms, Middle Eastern rulers borrowed heavily from European banks. Much money was wasted on personal luxuries rather than productive investment. Projects like the Suez Canal, while transformative, plunged Egypt into crushing debt. By the 1870s, both the Ottoman Empire and Egypt were effectively bankrupt. Financial control led directly to military occupation. The chains of debt became literal chains of colonial control. The rivalry between Britain and Russia, the Great Game, devastated states caught between them. Persia was carved up into British and Russian spheres of influence. Russian expansion brought genocide and mass deportation to the Caucasus peoples. The spread of printing and education created new intellectual movements. The Arab Nahda, or Awakening, began as a cultural and literary revival. American and French missionary schools, alongside new state institutions, created vibrant intellectual environments. Political consciousness followed cultural awakening. The Young Arab Society, meeting in Paris, had only 5 members in its first years. Among Kurds, a people divided between empires, modern national consciousness began to emerge. Armenians developed a powerful movement demanding reforms and protection from persecution. In Palestine, small groups of European Jewish pioneers began establishing agricultural settlements. The Zionist movement, led by Theodor Herzl, sought great power support for a Jewish state. These early settlements were small, but they represented the beginning of a process that would reshape the land. The final decades of the 19th century saw accelerated European takeover. France took Tunisia, Britain occupied Egypt, promising temporary control that lasted decades. Local resistance was fierce but ultimately unsuccessful against European industrial military power. The First World War delivered the final blow to the Ottoman Empire. European diplomats drew new borders, but they were not starting from a blank slate. The roots of today's conflicts run deep through 4 centuries of transformation. The refugee crises of today have precursors in the 19th century flight of the Muhajirs. The Sunni-Shia divide that shapes conflicts today was the central fault line between Ottoman and Safavid empires. Yet beneath the political fragmentation, deep cultural continuities and human connections persist. To understand the Middle East today is to see the long shadows cast by decaying empires, rising nationalisms, and foreign interventions. The headlines of today are often the final chapters of stories that began long ago, in a world that is gone but not forgotten.